Hello, hello, hello. Nate here with the Volunteer Tech Vlog on the Live Sound 101 YouTube channel. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for checking out the Live Sound 101 video series. I got a playlist I'll link to that shows those first 8 videos there. And eventually that list is going to grow once I get time to sit down and do a more produced series. But in the meantime, I'm talking very candidly in these vlog videos with you about live sound and how to do it, and audio lessons and media reports, and answering feedback and your questions and comments that come in. And boy, do those comments come pouring in. I think I had like 4 comments I answered in the last video. Those comments just came pouring into the channel there. So anyway, yeah. So that's kind of what I'm doing in this channel, and it's been going good. I'm getting subscribers, getting people interested, and you know, it's the way I imagine people consume this stuff is listening in the background when they're doing something else. You just, you know, click on the playlist wherever you left off, and you just kind of let the thing go, and you can listen in reverse chronological order or in chronological order. So I should probably get to the point of what I'm actually going to talk about in this video. And I think this will be, so I do audio lessons, I do vlogs. I started like a video category to do video, and I haven't done a whole lot of those. I started doing one, but I haven't done a whole lot of those videos, if you will, videos about videos. I think today, what I want to talk about in live sound is how do you get consistency? So this would be kind of less of an audio lesson, more of just like a vlog, you know, a topic, something that's important to think about, but not necessarily like teaching or talking about the dB or, you know, how to mix or how to EQ or compression or something like that. It's more of like in general, how do you get consistency, especially when you have a group of volunteers that is on like a rotating schedule. How do you get consistency from week to week? So this is a good thing to think about. This is a good thing to explore, because you don't want the experience on Sunday morning to be drastically different. Well, I should rephrase that. You don't want the experience on Sunday morning to be unintentionally drastically different, you know, by some sort of random occurrence, right? I mean, you want to kind of have a baseline of, okay, here's how we do things. This is what works for us, and let's see if we can execute. And you know, well, first let's define the requirements, define the goal, and let's see if we can execute and hit that goal, and do the job right to make sure we, you know, can strive after consistency. Now, the reason I put that caveat in there about being unintentional or intentional is, you know, maybe one week you want to do something drastically different because it suits the message or the, you know, a theme that you're going for, and there are reasons why you would want to drastically mix things up. But whatever your baseline is, you want to be able to replicate what's happening from week to week if possible. So what are some ways that can be done? So we've got this concept of consistency. What are some ways that we can execute on that? And I'm just going to adjust the camera a little bit here because I saw that cable kind of dangling in there, and I don't like that. No, it's still there. Oh, maybe that's a little better. All right. So what are some ways we get? So if you've got a digital, so I mean, let's just come out and say, so this is one of the main reasons why digital boards are so popular, and so many people love the digital board. It's because with the click of a button or a mouse click or keyboard shortcut or something, you can recall last week's settings like very, very quickly, very easily. And that really does a lot to maintain consistency. So all things equal, you know, if you keep your amplifier levels, you know, kind of locked in at a certain point, so your amps, you know, the system level type stuff isn't changing from week to week, or people don't necessarily have direct access to that 2 chain, but maybe the volunteers don't even don't even really, excuse me, volunteers don't really even have access to that, or they're just trained not to mess with certain settings. And you kind of create a sandbox for them to play in, which is the digital mixer, and you set some parameters or some default mixes for them to go by, and possibly the preamps are also remote controllable, which is big, because somebody could come in with a bass guitar rig, for example, that outputs a certain level, and then the next guy comes in and he just plugs his instrument directly through. He doesn't have any preamps or anything in his bass rig, or he doesn't even have a bass rig. And now that bass guitar, even if you say, okay, we're gonna plug bass into channel 21 every week, because everybody knows that 21 is the best sounding channel for bass. Ask any professional audio person. There's just something about channel 21 where bass just sounds great. That was a joke. I'm just kidding. It's just early in the morning, so I don't show any type of emotion. We just have, so let's just say you show bass on channel 21 every time, but you got 2 or 3 different bass players that cycle through there with different rigs. The preamp is going to need to be adjusted, or possibly a 20 dB pad engaged, depending on the level of what that bass player puts out. So the mix file can only get you so far, but you have to be aware of the capabilities of that default mix and recalling a mix on a digital board and what your mixer can actually do. And if it can recall preamp settings, that's great. But now you've got to have another default mix for each, player or each band. You've got to think about how you're going to do it. And this is, striving for consistency. This is a really good argument for having a church-owned electric guitar rig, having a church-owned bass guitar rig, having a church-owned keyboard. And it's difficult to navigate this sometimes, because I'm a musician, and I have a guitar that I'm comfortable playing, and when I pick up another guitar, yeah, I can play that guitar, it's fine, but it doesn't have the same feel necessarily. And so musicians, and rightfully so, tend to be picky about what instruments and what gear they use, and that all has to do with their sound and their style and their preference, and it's very, it's a very subjective type of thing. But if you can get to a place where your musicians are on board with a church-owned rig of some sort, that can do a lot to bring consistency, because then the person is just showing up, and the gear is figured out. The sound tech knows, okay, I'm going to need to, replace the batteries in this because the rig is defined. Like when you have an instrument, when you have a musician come in and say it's a guitar player and they bring in some sort of guitar rig, the sound guy really has no control over the lifespan of the 9-volt batteries that are in this guitar player's guitar rig, right? So one could be going bad and it could fail Sunday morning and cause all kinds of problems and headaches, and the sound volunteer is just maybe unfamiliar with the equipment, doesn't understand fully how it works. Some guitar rigs have, DC power distribution, so they don't need to worry about batteries, and maybe there's a newer guitar player and he doesn't really understand how often to change. So there could be all kinds of different variations, but so consistency. So I think I've talked about 2 things so far. So one of them would be the digital board. That was the first thing. Analog board, it's just, you could write down all the different settings on like a notepad, or I've even seen people take like little pictures of an analog board, or they'll create like PDFs that show all like a channel strip or a bunch of different channels, so you can kind of do like a manual save as for a mix on an analog board, but that's very time consuming to do that. So that's one way, the digital board. Then the second way I talked about was, controlling maybe I'll put a name on it. Controlling the fringes or the edge devices, the devices at the edge of the system. So your guitar rigs, your bass rigs, your keyboard rigs, your drums, the way you mic your drums. Having church-owned property where that stuff stays here and it's locked down and it's, you know, it's not relying on 9-volt batteries. That can be a good thing. Now mix preference is a little bit different. So I think along with having like the hardware lockdown and a mix file, I feel like each organization kind of needs like a mixing philosophy, if you will. And somebody who's good at mixing knows what they like, but they also know how to achieve what somebody else likes. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that made so like you might have somebody who's approaching a mix and they like to do things a certain way. They like to take all the drums and put them on a sub, not a subwoofer, but like a sub mix, and so that they can turn the whole drum kit up with one fader, down with one fader, or they might use groups, or I think there's a bunch of VCAs. There's a whole bunch of different terms for ways you can use groups, things like that, depending on the technology that you're using. Some different other mixing preferences might include just how you approach EQ and compression, in terms of like the order in which you do it, things like that. But the other big one is how much bass you tend to mix with, and just what your system can handle. But somebody who's good at mixing should know what they like, but they should also be able to achieve, a sound that is kind of laid out for them. So I think the next thing I'm going to say in terms of how to, achieve consistency would be to have a philosophy, have some sort of a few sentences written that describe what you're trying to achieve every week. And that might be, depending on the level of skill of your organization, that might be as simple as, we want the vocal to be the focal point of the mix, and the instruments are secondary. If you can't hear and understand the vocals, that's a problem, right? So if you've got mixes that are happening where you can't always hear the vocal, just because people are focusing on other things in the mix, or they're kind of getting distracted, it might be good to have a few sentences just kind of written down saying, this is what we value. We value the mix, the vocal, the lead vocal and the backup vocals to be, boom, front and center, the most prominent thing in the mix. And yeah, the instruments are great, but we want, at the end of the day, this is what we care about the most in the mix. And that might be as simple as it is. Now you might go into it more, and you might say, well, we want the vocal to be more prominent in the mix, but we really like the bass guitar to be here. I don't know, however you guys want to approach it. But it might be good to start thinking about that, and so everybody kind of has a reference point to go back to say, okay, what am I trying to do? This is what we're trying to achieve each week. Now DBSPL comes into play here too, because you can have a great mix and have it be too quiet, or you can have a great mix and have it be too loud. So you do want to have a range. I would say you want to have a range. You want to understand your dynamic range in your room and what your congregation appreciates, and that is a bit of a tricky thing to navigate, I will say. But you should think about that dB range. Okay, we want our range to be from about 85 to 95 dB SPLA weighted, as measured from this location week in and week out, and provided the dBSPL meter is calibrated properly and you're not using your phone or something like that. Like, there's got to be some sort of consistency to your measurements, because the measurements can be haywire depending on what app you pull up, and if your iPhone microphone is working properly, or you've got a case around your phone that's obstructing the microphone, so point being, don't trust an app necessarily on your phone unless you really understand what you're doing and how to calibrate one of these things. And better yet, you may want to invest in a dB meter that is fixed in the room somewhere and is stationary. That's what we do. And I haven't really looked into much to the calibration of this thing. I've just we've used the same one, set up the same way week in and week out. So I don't know how much the calibration of this thing would change, but I'm gonna have to dig into the manual of this, because I've seen this posted on a couple of the forums on Facebook, the Church Sound Media Tech Facebook group. I've seen people post that calibration of the meter is really important, and I've never really seen anybody demonstrate how to calibrate a meter. And I honestly haven't looked through the instruction manual of our meter. I don't even know the make and model of it off the top of my head, so I should probably dig into that and look up the calibration page and see if the thing can be calibrated and how to do so, and what they recommend for frequency of calibration in terms of, you do it once a month, once a year, whatever. So that's probably something I should look into. But I have just assumed use the same one in the same location, dialed in the same way, and you're probably going to be okay. But maybe calibration of meters, one thing. So consistency, talked about having recallable mix files. We talked about dB range, and we talked about church-owned hardware, because you can control church-owned hardware, and when you've got a revolving door of stuff coming in and coming out, it can be a little tricky. So, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before. I'm getting to the point on this YouTube channel where I really have to go back and look at all the different things I've talked about first before I talk about something. Because chances are I've actually probably already talked about it at some point. So if this all sounds familiar, that's probably why. It is funny when you first start vlogging on a project like this. It's like, blue sky. Everything's new, and you can just go. And then you do it for like a couple years, and you start to think about, is there anything new I can talk about that I haven't already talked about yet? And so anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. So those are some ideas to achieve consistency. But if I missed anything or you have suggestions, this is where it's really cool, because those are the things that, off the cuff came to mind. But I'm sure there's people watching, or there will be in the future, that are saying, oh, Nate, you forgot about this, or you forgot about this. And then I can read those comments. I'll get a notification when you comment below this video, and then I can learn something from you guys out there. So this YouTube thing for me is kind of a delayed form of communication. It's almost like we're having a chat back and forth, except for it's time delayed. So when you chime in, I'll see that comment, and then I'll learn something new that maybe wasn't on my radar. And I think that's a good thing. So that will about do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Remember to head over to the Live Sound 101 community if you want to introduce yourself, share what projects you've been working on. If you've got photos, or if you've got a blog, or if you've got a podcast, or whatever you're doing, feel free to share it. If it's about live sound, pro audio, pro video, check out the Live Sound 101 community on Google+. Got a nice little community going there. And yeah, this whole project is about teaching others that maybe don't know anything about live sound, how to think about live sound, how to be a live sound person. And that was the whole idea behind this project, is how do I train people remotely, virtually, that are interested in learning sound. And hopefully a few of those people will live nearby and join our team. That's kind of the thinking, is that create this content, and we would be able to build our local team of sound volunteers. And I don't know if I'm achieving that goal. We've definitely got Wes, Wes is a recent guy. He joined the team since I started creating these. I know he's aware of the videos. I don't know if Wes watches them all that much though. But he's a pretty bright guy. He's into robotics and stuff. So he's definitely got the technical chops to do this stuff. And I don't know, that's kind of the thinking of this whole project there. So anyway, my name's Nate. I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.